The Addiction Podcast, Point of No Return.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Addiction Podcast, Point of No Return. My name is Joni Siegel, and I'm the host for this podcast. My husband, Steve Siegel, is the producer of the podcast. If you have a story you'd like to share with us, please reach out to us either on our website, theaddictionpodcast.com, or our email, theaddictionpodcast@yahoo.com. Just a reminder to please subscribe to this podcast wherever you listen to podcasts. And if you would be so kind as to give us a 5-star rating, then when people are suffering from addiction or they have loved ones who are suffering from addiction, they will find us when they Google podcasts about addiction. Please also subscribe to our YouTube channel, give us a thumbs up on our videos, and ring the bell so that you're notified when we put up a new video. Today's episode is episode number 327, and today we have an interview with a woman named Rebecca Kiesling. If you have been following any of the news and congressional hearings about fentanyl, then you've seen her. I don't want to tell you her story. I'm going to let her do it. So without further ado, let's talk to Rebecca Kiesling. Rebecca Kiesling, thank you so much for being willing to be on the podcast today and share your story with us.
Thanks so much for having me.
Can you share with us, how do I start? About your family. Tell us about your family. How many children do you have? And are they all adopted? Just tell us a little bit about your family.
So I had 3 adopted children and 3 biological daughters, adopted first. And all 3 of my adopted children are deceased. My baby Cassie died at 33 days old. She had a serious genetic disorder, and a cardiologist took her off of oxygen when she wasn't ready to be. And there was more medical malpractice involved. And so we went through a lot of, tragedy then.
Yep.
And
how long ago was that, Rebecca? How long ago?
Almost 22 years ago.
Oh.
23? Oh, gosh. Yeah, 23.
Okay.
And then our 2 sons, Caleb and Kyler, had the same birth mother. Nicole, she was 16 when Caleb was born. She had been drinking during the pregnancy. We knew that early on because she said she never took a pregnancy test because she thought she was just having a hangover every day. So, and her mom, who raised her, was a drug addict. And we were told that she had done heroin. And her father, the birth mother's father and grandfather, both died in their 30s from heart failure, alcohol abuse related. So we knew that Caleb had a family history of abuse. And
how did you know their mother? I'm just curious. How did you become acquainted with her?
Through an attorney. There was another baby that I helped save from an abortion that I was going to adopt, and then she backed out, and her lawyer then a few days later said, well, a 16-year-old girl just stepped forward. Are you interested? She's due next week. We found out the morning she was born that she picked us, and we brought him home the next day. And then we found out that I was friends with her aunt. And actually her grandparents were pro-life activists. So it was kind of a small, circle in that respect. So we ended up having an open adoption.
Okay. And
so we knew when she was pregnant again. And we knew something wasn't quite right. She was 7 months and not showing. And we gave her a crib and didn't know what exactly was going on. But then when he was 2 months old, we called to get the boys together for a photo. It was just after Christmas. And we found out that day that the baby had been taken away, and it was in the news that night. His biological father was high on heroin and tried to drown him.
Oh, my God.
Yeah. And
was that Kyler or Caleb?
Kyler.
Oh.
Yeah, and his biological uncle
oh, my God.
revived him. And so eventually facing trial on the child abuse and neglect charges, where they kept faltering on their drug testing and everything and fleeing rehab. They finally consented to us adopting Kyler so he could be raised with his brother. So we got him when he was a year old.
Okay.
And, she tested positive 4 times during her pregnancy, including because she had shoplifted early in the pregnancy. So including a week before he was born. And they let them take him home from the hospital, which wasn't right.
Wow.
So he was pretty haywire. He had, was diagnosed with ADHD, and at a young age, someone told me, sensory dysfunction or sensory integration disorder. So I did like holistic treatments for him, tried to do everything I could to help. They kept saying that, we'd take heroin any day over cocaine and over crack, that those babies, like, they're fine. But he always struggled. He struggled with impulsivity his entire life. We had so many trips to ER, pretty death-defying.
Wow.
He drank a bottle of Benadryl. We had it locked. He climbed and got the key. And then he climbed and unlocked. 3 years old.
Wow.
He wasn't even talking, and he could climb. Unbelievable climber. He also drank a bottle of allergy medication, and then he almost chopped off his toe once with a pickaxe in the garage. And just all kinds of serious stuff. He was an incredible athlete, fearless. So I used to teach gymnastics, so I taught him tumbling. He was just absolutely fearless, incredible skateboarder. Taught himself to ride a bike at 3. Didn't know how to brake, but he could ride a bike.
Wow.
And he was a gross motor kid, not a fine motor kid. Caleb was the opposite. Caleb was a fine motor kid, very intellectual. He could say over 80 words at 10 months old.
Wow.
He was a big reader, played chess, really excelled in academics. I homeschooled them. And my 3 biological daughters that I had after them, I homeschooled them all until Caleb was in 7th grade.
Okay. And did they experiment with drugs that you know of?
So their addiction started with vaping in middle school.
Interesting.
Nicotine was their first addiction. And and Caleb said it was actually their birth mother's uncle, who was 3 years older than him. He's the one who introduced them to vaping. And just kind of fast forward, his uncle was at their funeral, and so was their birth mother. He died a month after them. He was found with a fentanyl patch. He was doing fentanyl on purpose, and their birth mother died 6 months after them.
Wow. It's interesting you say that he started with vaping. We've had people on the podcast talking about vaping and how you get such a higher dose of tobacco from vaping than you can ever that you can ever get from just smoking a cigarette, which of course is horrible.
It was I would warn them all the time that it was a gateway drug. They got more warnings than any kid ever.
I'm sure.
Because I heard a lot of really cruel people in the past month since I testified before Congress who have, said, what kind of a mother raises her children to do drugs? What kind of a mother thinks it's okay to be doing Percocets? Like, what? Are you crazy? Like, you didn't teach them. Problem is, bad parenting. And then you've got the Mexican president saying, I didn't hug them enough. Like,
oh my God. That is such bullshit. Excuse me. Now I have to put on the podcast. It's not clean, but that's just so offensive to me. That's offensive that people would say that to you. That's just wrong.
And there's people who would say that they should have been aborted. There's people who are saying I should have been aborted. There's people who are saying that, I should be the next one to die.
God, you got to wonder about some people. sometimes. The hardest thing about getting someone into recovery is getting them to agree to treatment. Bobby Newman, a certified drug counselor with 30 years experience and an over 85% success rate as an interventionist, has created a series of 12 videos that you can use right now to learn every step to get your loved one to agree to treatment. Call 866-989-4499 today and say the word podcast to get a 10% discount. Or go to newmaninterventions.com and type in the word podcast for a 10% discount. This service comes with a free 1-hour consultation with Bobby. So tell me, okay, started with vaping. Did they do other
and
drugs?
Just one more thing about the vaping.
Yeah.
Kyler, he would try to go off it for wrestling, and he did different times. And he would tell me that he had the worst headache, that he would be sick, throwing up for 3 days, getting off the tobacco, getting off the nicotine. He said it made him angry. It made him jittery. It totally affected their relationship with us, with others. It's a gateway drug in every respect because it creates a substance, addiction, a chemical dependency.
Well, and that should tell our listeners something, that if you think that vaping is better for your child than just going and buying cigarettes and smoking, you need to think again.
Yeah, and it shows that they're vulnerable to peer pressure. And impulsive, and so my girls have never done any of this. Right. But my boys, we're vulnerable. There's a lot of peer pressure, and it's really bad at the schools. We're in one of the best school districts in the country. Mm-hmm. It's not like, we're a bad neighborhood or anything like that. And we're a middle class family. Our kids didn't have access to cash. It's not like, we're just, if they have these problems because they're a bunch of rich kids and the kids parents give them money. Like, no. I made sure that they didn't have that kind of access. I did everything I was supposed to as a parent to shut this down. Right. I waited a long time before they got phones, and then checked their phones. And then, they outsmarted us. It was tough.
Well, and you can't be with them 24/7.
Yeah, I was when I was homeschooling. I wish I'd never stopped homeschooling them, honestly. Wish I'd never got them a phone.
And I get that, but at some point they're going to go out there, Rebecca. You cannot be with them 24/7. You just can't.
Yeah. So it taught them how to lie. It taught them how to steal to support it. Mm. It taught them how to even deal in the vaping in order to support it. So it was a gateway drug in every respect. It taught them how to get things illegally. It's not legal for kids to have, right?
No. Yeah.
So yeah, it's 100% a gateway drug.
And so did they do other drugs that you're aware of? I'm leading up to what ultimately happened with them. Okay.
And there was a whole, battle here in Michigan to legalize marijuana, and eventually it became legal. Okay. So it was all like, stupid parents, what do you know? It's not a gateway drug. You're so dumb. That's, what all these kids are saying, right?
That's right.
And I learned, gosh, the whole vaping thing, I didn't even know what a cartridge was. I didn't know what it looked like. When I saw it, it looked like some kind of computer thing because, not all of them are long. Some of them are like these short little it looked like a computer device.
Like a USB stick. Yeah.
Yeah. I had no clue what it was. And they got away with that, hiding it. And then, learning that they can add other things can be added because the school held something on it. They had the sheriff deputy bring in the parents to try to educate everybody on these issues. Yep. And, so I learned that they, put in things like Molly and THC. And sure enough, they were putting THC in it. And then it was found marijuana. I went to the school, went to the sheriff deputy who's there at the school every day. He told me if I bring it in, they'll have to prosecute. And he's like, you don't want to do that because then as parents, the it's like $300 a night or more to stay in Children's Village and the juvenile detention. I mean, it was like, there's no resources for you. I asked for help and there were no resources. They never gave us anywhere to go for rehab. Never once told me warnings about fentanyl or Narcan. Like, did you know that this is going around? Did you know that? Like, nothing. And I was the active parent. I was there. I gave them everything they needed to shut down the vaping trade that was going on in the school, who the dealers were. I gave them everything they needed.
Wow.
And then, and then the only thing they offered was Kyler was taken by my ex-husband to the county jail. They had sort of a scared straight program where, you go in there, you tour the jail, and you meet with some inmates who try to scare them into ever getting into trouble, right?
Right.
So, but, the times that they did get in trouble with the law, again, none of them warned me. Like, right before they died, I can't even say that word. Gosh, it's so hard.
I know. I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
Yeah, they'd been arrested for trying to break into a jewelry store. It was really they just kind of playing with the door, and same thing, a truck at the jewelry store. They didn't actually break in, but there was video footage of them. And so and we had reported them when they stole from us. We tried to get them arrested because I didn't know what to do. And my ex-husband heads up Celebrate Recovery at church. Okay, he became an alcoholic. Like, we had been warned, don't ever have alcohol in the house. It's so important not to have and they started drinking, after he got sober. But my son Caleb was the one who told me that Dad was passing out every night and that he had driven under the influence, and so I had to give an ultimatum. He stopped drinking, never drank again, and been in it for several years. And he became the head of Celebrate Recovery.
Okay.
It turns out they don't even have, well, they do now at the local one, but before they died, they didn't have resources.
Yep.
And it was all like, well, you have to want to go to Celebrate Recovery, but they had no resources for medical rehab. They didn't have any Narcan training at the time there. They didn't talk about fentanyl. They didn't and that was a recovery organization.
Right.
National.
Right.
And he would go to the national meetings and they weren't talking about Narcan and fentanyl and all that.
You are listening to the Addiction Podcast, Point of No Return. For more information on the podcast or to reach out if you have a story you would like to share with us, go to our Facebook page by the same name, or you can email us at theaddictionpodcast@yahoo.com, or go to our website, theaddictionpodcast.com, or call us at 727-314-7080. And please remember to subscribe to our podcast wherever you listen to podcasts and give us a 5-star review.
I mean, so I kind of relied on him to help get resources. But when a police officer told me that my son had admitted to have been under the influence of Xanax, the detective didn't warn me, didn't tell me, that's not real Xanax. Like I have a family member, who had been on Xanax, and I knew it's for anxiety, but I didn't know it was anything that could kill them. My son had told me that he first got hooked on Xanax and like pain meds in 9th grade when kids were bringing it to school from their parents' unlocked medicine cabinets. So I made sure we didn't have any of that in the house. When my ex-husband had shoulder surgery, he had a port. We made sure he had no bottles. We didn't have any pills in that, nothing like that. And I heard of the opioid epidemic. I knew that it destroyed lives because people couldn't function, they couldn't work.
Right.
But I didn't know it could kill them.
Right.
You didn't hear that people were dying from that.
Right.
did everything I could to try to prevent this. When my son had knee surgery, I again made sure no opioids, absolutely no opioids, because I knew that they were at risk.
Yep.
But I didn't know about, that Xanax isn't Xanax and that there's a Tizalam, like this, benzo that's only legal in 3 nations. Like I've learned so much since.
Right. So what happened with the boys? Tell us what happened.
So they got in trouble and they got clean in jail. I didn't bail them out. They had an $8,500 bond, and like, not bailing you out. I'm so glad you're safe. Like, I was happy that they were safe, and Caleb immediately repented and just was, crying and said, "Mom, you're my superhero. You always cared. You always inspected our room, And he's like, "Just please don't ever abandon me. Please don't ever abandon me." He said he wanted to, he started doing, actually, like, Celebrate Recovery, Bible study while in jail. And he was quoting scripture, "I'm more than a conqueror. I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me." And he's like, "I'm going to overcome this." He's like, "I don't want to have to do probation. I just want to stay here and stay clean." But it was COVID, right? COVID had just hit a couple months before. And Kyler was furious I wouldn't bail him out. So he was like calling me names and, really like chaotic. And then 2 weeks later, he suddenly got clean, and he calls me and he's like, "Mom," and he's like, "I'm completely clean." He's like, "Even the nicotine's out of my system. My face is clearing up." And he said, "I'm in here with people who had the worst childhoods. They grew up with abuse and, terrible neighborhoods, homes full of drugs, parents in prison." And he said, "You raised us right." And he started crying and he's like, "I had the best childhood. I have so many good memories. We did so many cool things and went to so many fun places." And he said, "I'm so glad you adopted me." And, they were going to be okay. I was so glad. And then there was this organization that won a lawsuit against the jail. And so they were bailing people out. And they said if they could get the judge to reduce bond to $1,500, they would bail them both out. And I begged them, "Please don't. Please don't. My boys are safe. Please don't." And, probation, all of that. I talked to everybody, begged everybody, "Please don't do this." And they went ahead and did it anyway. And the judge reduced the bond. And I said, "They need rehab." And they said, "Well, okay, we get state, federal, local, county funding and for rehab." And so, yeah, but they didn't give Kyler rehab. They gave him tether. And
What's that?
Tether, that he had an electronic box on his ankle.
Okay.
So he was staying with some kid like 30 minutes away from us. A kid who I'm pretty sure had overdosed before. I didn't realize it, but after the fact, I realized who that kid was. But, and then Caleb was sent to rehab. The problem is that it wasn't real rehab. I didn't know the difference. It was a flop house. Okay. It was just another halfway house. And here they are getting all of the federal funds and state funds that are supposed to be allocated for rehab. It's not rehab.
Right.
The only thing that you could even remotely describe as rehab, Caleb told me, and I went to visit the place. The only thing they had group meetings once a day.
Okay.
Like a group session, and you could talk or not talk. And that was it. That's it. People are dying, and this is the rehab they're offering. So every time like anybody talks about, like politicians talk about money I'm thinking, you're wasting your money. I actually said that when I testified before Congress, because I know where that money's going. There's no oversight.
Nope.
And I would love to see real rehab being funded, but I didn't know the difference, and most people don't.
Mm-hmm.
And there's also nothing that requires, police to warn parents, or for hospitals, there's HIPAA laws, so you don't get warned if your kid overdoses, Um, so I was in the dark, and, they would go for walks, and there were guys in this terrible neighborhood who would buy drugs while they would go out for their walks while they're in this rehab. It's bad. And then, so Caleb was clean for a while, and so was Kyler. His girlfriend was told me after the fact what happened, but then suddenly he deteriorated, and Caleb started to deteriorate when my ex-husband kind of set him up with a car. So, and I'm like, why are you giving him a car? They're supposed to be working. He's out of rehab. Caleb's home, and they're under court order, that they're supposed to have to work and go to testing and all that stuff. And it was COVID, and Caleb said, why should I work? I'm making more money than I've ever made before from the government, right? Making money. I'm like, that's not earning money. They both worked in restaurants, and my daughter went back to work right away in the restaurant. So the government encouraged young men to stay home and do nothing, and paid them for it and paid for their drugs. Caleb, we actually controlled his funds. Kyler, I don't know what happened. The money is gone as far as I know, but I thought my ex-husband had been controlling it. But he got this girl to give him some money. And this is the girl, I guess, who I found out after the fact that she had given him money. His girlfriend knew not to give him money. Everybody knew, don't give him money, right? Caleb, the day he got a car, he went and got some kind of drugs. He told me it was just marijuana. But I knew, like, something's wrong. And I asked him, are you doing Xanax? Like, what's going on? And he asked me to go get Chinese dinner. I went off and came home, and he was sitting in the driveway in his car, and then he suddenly backs out, goes up into our neighbor's lawn, and takes off. And I start calling around, and now it's, I'm calling him, where are you going? He's like, I'm going to my friend's right around the corner. He didn't make it there, didn't go. And it was a couple hours later, and my ex-husband was out of town. So a couple hours later, I get a call. He's in jail. He'd been arrested for driving under the influence. And I'm like, thank God he's okay. Did you hurt anybody? Everybody's okay. I'm like, okay, thank God he's behind bars. We had been calling, like, probation to come pick him up. They said they weren't doing that. They knew he was in violation, but it's COVID and his hearing's 2 months away. We have a hearing set. I'm like, you have to come get him. He needs help, please. Nothing, no help. And so I'm like, thank God he's behind bars. $150 bond. Like, what? You aren't taking him to county jail? He's violating probation. You should see you're not going to take him to county jail. And so, no, I'm not bailing him out. My ex-husband wouldn't. My other son was screaming at me. They called their birth mother, who had been in jail with them. They hadn't seen her in months, in years. In 6 years, they hadn't seen her. But they had noticed her in jail. And she called me, chewing me out. What kind of a mother doesn't bail her kid out for $150? I'm like, a mother who loves her son. He could have died driving under the influence. So anyhow, she bailed him out. And 8 days later, is when they died. The day before, my daughter was told by her cousin that Caleb had posted pictures of pills on Snapchat. And so everybody was scared. We knew that he could get, violent when he was doing what we thought was Xanax. And so I called my ex-husband, and I said, take him to rehab. He needs rehab. And he's like, well, I don't know where to take him. It was like in the afternoon. He's like, I'll take him to a hotel tonight. Kyler needs to go too, because he can't stay where he's staying anymore. He has to leave today. And I'm like, you can't take him to a hotel. Like, You can't leave them there. They have to be, they're not supposed to be together. They're under court order. They're not allowed to be together. You have to stay with them. And he's like, I'm not staying. You staying with them. Like, I'm afraid. And like, he should know, to get him to rehab, stay with them. Well, he took him to the hotel and found out 5 months later that, because, I didn't know when all these young people were there. There were 5 of them there. One girl didn't ever take the fake Percocets with the fentanyl. She apparently woke up in the morning and saw the 4 people, called her friend, and freaked out thinking everybody's dead. Her drug dealer boyfriend, turns out, got revived with Narcan, but she didn't call the police. She waited the whole day. And the girl who was there, 17-year-old girl, Sophia, her parents, she was missing. She lied, told her parents she was at a friend's house, and they couldn't find her. So they used like phone tracking to find where she was. And they thought they were just doing like a peace, like officer, like check. And that's when the girl came down and said, there's a Sophia in my room. And she took the police up there, didn't come out for a while and came out crying. And then she claimed that she didn't know that they were all dead, but she had called a friend earlier in the day and said she thought they were. So she let them die. Like, they could have been saved with Narcan potentially, but she just sat there and did nothing. And then my ex-husband, I'm thinking, when did all these young people arrive? I found out 5 months in that this girl testified at a preliminary exam. And that's when I found out they were all there at 5 p.m. when my ex-husband checked them into the hotel the day before. And the room was in her name because he didn't want to be liable for damages. Because he knew they were all high.
Wow.
So her dad chewed him out at sentencing. What kind of a man? And this guy got a plea deal of 8 to 15 years because the prosecutor said that they felt a jury would be more upset with him because he should have been the responsible adult.
Yep.
He's father to my 3 daughters. Like, wow. I mean, this is why I divorced him, because of all the sort of enabling.
Yeah.
And I know he has a lot of regrets that he's got to live with. But I have a lot of regrets too.
And you've got 3 daughters to raise.
Yeah. And let me tell you, people say, oh, you can't blame yourself. It's all hindsight. I'm like, you know what? So if I knew then what I know now, I would have done so many things differently.
Of course.
And Caleb, our last words were, he's like, what's this, Mom? You're all upset with me. And I said, I'm so worried about you. I told him a lot of people are worried about you. And I threw my arms around him and I just said, I love you so much. And he said, I love you too, Mom. And then I just said it again. I love you so much. And he said, I love you too, Mom. And those were our last words. And I think of this stupid president of Mexico saying I didn't hug my kids enough.
I'm so sorry.
He knew how much I loved him.
Yeah.
I didn't know what to do. I didn't know the risks. I didn't know that they could die.
Yep.
Well, I didn't know about fentanyl. I never heard of fentanyl.
And what a horrible way to find out. I mean, the reason we do this podcast is because we don't want parents to go through what you did. And we have to get the word out there to parents that when their kids are, quote unquote, experimenting with drugs, they run the risk of getting pills that are laced with fentanyl more often than not and dying, like Caleb and Kyler. These are not overdose deaths. These are poisoning deaths. These are, as you said in your hearing, this is murder. This is not.
Caleb was going to be going into the Navy. He had scored a 90 on the PCOT test, which means the 90th percentile. And that was a year and a half after graduating, and he hadn't been doing any school since. He'd just been working, cooking in kitchens. He loved cooking. And so he decided he would go into the Navy, and he had his life set. I mean, and then he said he didn't go because he was worried about Kyler.
Mm.
And that was the fall before. And then when he got out of jail, he said that he couldn't go into the Navy because he hadn't like reported it. So he was going to look into another branch of the military. But he said to me that he didn't want to go. He said, I don't want to go into the Army or the Marines. He said, because I don't want to die. Like, he didn't want to die.
Yeah.
And the day after they died, my ex-husband found their they had each written something. So Kyler had something he wrote in jail with his 17-point goals. And he wanted to be free from nicotine.
Yep.
He wanted to be free from drugs. He wanted to have a great relationship with us. He wanted to make something of his life. He didn't want to follow in the footsteps of their birth mother.
Yep.
He had graduated the day before he died, so that was the deal they thought they were celebrating. And Caleb we found his he had written a long testimony. It was like 2 pages, like tiny print. This is what he wanted to be sharing in schools and churches to tell people why not to do drugs. And
Right.
I read some of that before Congress, but he absolutely believed that he was, he said that my failures don't even begin to define who I am.
Right.
He said, I'm so much more than that. That's still true.
Yep.
Still true.
Yep. Yep.
And
So
he talked about, again, like, be able to overcome it, and that he's going to, have a great life. And it was like 2 months before they didn't get the help that they needed.
right.
But they wanted to be free. They desperately wanted to be free. But when fentanyl's getting added to everything, it's so powerful.
Yep.
It's not like, people who experimented with, different drugs when they were younger. Like, you barely stand a chance.
Yeah.
And I hate to, I don't want to give, make it hopeless, because I know people who have gotten clean from it. They have friends who got clean from it now who said that their deaths caused a movement
Yep.
in our area.
Well, and you have not been sitting there being the sad mom. I mean, you have been in front of Congress how many times now?
Once, but
But it's all over the news. That one was a big deal.
Well, because I went all mama bear.
Yes.
Because I was so furious at the Democrat who spoke right before me, Benny Thompson. He's the ranking House member. So from the minority party, right? They call him the ranking House member on the committee. And he had 5 minutes before I spoke. And it just started to boil up in me when he starts talking about, xenophobia and racism, and that this is a nation who welcomes people across our border. And, we shouldn't be living in fear. We need to be welcoming people. That's who we are. And that there's people, why are they coming? They're seeking refuge, they're seeking help. And we need to protect them. And he started talking about Trump separating children from their parents. And, and I'm thinking, DNA, like, they can be reunited.
Yeah.
That's separate.
Yeah.
Right?
Yep.
I will never see my children again on Earth.
Yep. And unfortunately,
it just, boiled up inside of me.
And unfortunately, you're not alone. This is happening in alarming numbers because of the amount of fentanyl that's being manufactured in Mexico and brought over the borders. There are parents out there, so many more, who have experienced what you have. And, this is not overdose deaths. This is poisoning.
Honestly, I have not been. People think, oh, you're an activist. You're really active. People were telling me this is going to be your new cause because, I have been an activist for the pro-life issue.
Yeah.
But I was like, I wanted to die,
Yep.
It's still hard. Every day is a battle to survive.
Yep. How long ago did they die, Rebecca?
July 29th, 2020.
20. Yeah.
So it'll be 3 years in July. And every day, like, I was just doing everything I could to survive. I mean, I was like reading, I was thrown into these support groups on Facebook. And it was the month of August. So people were making these purple chairs for overdose awareness. And I'm thinking, they're creating kind of shrines for their children. It was really sweet and touching. But I was thinking, I don't ever want to have a purple chair. I don't want to remember them for how they died. I want to remember them for how they lived. My girls don't want me talking about their deaths. They're happy to talk about happy memories, but they do not want to hear anything about their deaths.
Yep.
And the loss. They're trying to cope. And and they were all close. I had 5 kids in 7 years.
Yep.
And I was in support groups like for Grief Share. I don't know if you know Grief Share.
No.
So I was in a group with other parents who lost their kids, and I was in Christian counseling, and I was listening to the book Heaven. But it was all in front of my face. And like after 3 months, I was having stress, tremors, panic attacks, and I wasn't going to make it. And they're like, well, the treatment for this, my doctor's like, is Xanax. Like, I'm not taking Xanax.
Yeah, no, that's not going to happen. Yeah.
No. And so he's like, well, you have to do something, or you're not going to have a say. You're going to end up hospitalized. You want to have a say. So I started like training, running, and then I decided I was going to do triathlons, and now I've been doing gravel racing, and I've been doing everything I can just to survive.
Yeah.
So I haven't been an activist, but because, of my past activism, and because their story was high profile because 3 people died. So it was like sensational.
Yeah.
Now, there was another kid who died in our hometown the same day. Didn't make the news. And then I find out about all these people in our area who have died. I never heard of it. Not once. And so it gained the attention of Congressman Green. And so he interviewed me for a podcast last summer. And then we got invited on Fox News. And then he promised me, I'm going to do something about this. I'm going to do something. So when, Republicans gained control of the House, his very first hearing ever as chairman of Homeland Security Committee was this hearing on the border. And I got invited to testify, and it went viral because I went all mama bear because I was really pissed.
Yep. Justifiably so. Rebecca, if you had one message to give to any parents or kids even that listen to our podcast, what would it be? What would you tell them? Based on what you know, what would you say?
Okay. First of all, vaping's not safe. Not okay. Get help for that. Number 2 is, no phones for kids, till they're a certain age. Because Snapchat, TikTok, this is where all the drug dealing's happening. And I've heard more about they have these symbols, these bricks that represent, you can get fake Percocets, and that, this is how they get hooked. They're inundating with them as they watch things on Snapchat.
Yeah.
And then there's no room for experimentation at all. And don't take a single pill or anything from anybody. I'm meeting parents now whose kids died from fake Adderall, everything. And I just met a parent whose child died because they were given fake Tylenol.
Oh my God.
And another parent I met, their child was clean and somebody put it in his drink.
Oh.
And we know that it's like the number 1 cause of death now, kids ages 1 to 7. There was that baby who died in the Airbnb in Florida because somebody had a cocaine party the night before. Like it's everywhere. And get real medical rehab, find places where you can get that, like dig for it. In my area, there's like Families Against Narcotics, and they can give people information. Make sure you have Narcan, but Narcan doesn't work against tranq. They're putting tranq now It's a horse tranquilizer. It's also flesh eating, but they're mixing it with fentanyl. So fentanyl strips don't work to detect fentanyl. And Narcan doesn't work when it's added with tranq.
Wow.
So if you're relying that Narcan will save me, like, it's still good to have Narcan in your home. But you need to get real rehab.
Yeah.
And there's no room for experimentation, no room from taking anything from anybody else, even if you know them.
Yep. I think that that's key, and hopefully the parents who listen can ding that home with their kids that, you think it's not going to happen to you, but it's like Russian roulette. I mean, why don't you just go get a revolver and spin the barrel? It's Russian roulette.
Even the pot shops, they're in Pennsylvania. These guys dropped from fentanyl poisoning, and were revived with Narcan, but it was in THC gummies at a tobacco shop.
Wow.
I don't trust any of them.
No,
none of them. And there's people who think, we can legalize narcotics. If we legalize narcotics, they'll be safe. Like the guy who was testifying from the Cato Institute. When fentanyl is given by doctor, it's in hospitals during surgery, and there's like an anesthesiologist present to make sure you don't die.
Regulated, yes.
So what we're going to have rooms where we have anesthesiologists lined up. So everybody come on in and do your fentanyl here. Like for people who are addicted, like that's insane. This is not something. It's not something that you can just regulate.
No.
It's not. And we don't teach people how to do drugs safely. You don't teach people how to drink and drive safely. You don't teach them how to text and drive safely. You teach them you don't ever.
Exactly. Rebecca, thank you for speaking out. I have a feeling that you will be speaking out more.
Yeah, there's one more thing I'd like to mention.
Yes, go ahead.
I am super concerned about the amount of fentanyl that's being found. And the mainstream media isn't talking about this, but the government, Pentagon, has ordered this injector thing that's in case of a terrorist attack with fentanyl. Okay. There in 2022, they intercepted enough fentanyl to kill a quarter of the world population. They only find 10%. They only intercept 10% is what we're told. The DEA says. So times 10, you're talking about, 2 times the world's population. That was in 2022. In the first 3 months of 2023, they met that. So now, if it stays on track and it doesn't accelerate, there would be enough, and this is just coming in 1 year, not what's already here, enough to kill the world's population 10 times over.
Yep.
And so much is in powder form. I seriously worry. And I looked this up, Googled it. Academics at major universities, medical doctors, there's teams discussing this, and the Pentagon have all discussed the possibility of a terrorist attack. The Russians used an aerosol fentanyl in 2002. When there was a hostage situation, it killed all the perpetrators and all the hostages, 130 hostages.
Wow.
Okay, so that technology to kill people via fentanyl has been around since at least 2002.
Yep.
And I'm super concerned about the sheer amount that is in this country now.
Yep.
And we're at war, and people need to be concerned because they are out to kill us.
Yep.
Our children and all of us. Babies are dying. They're not drug addicts. They're not experimenting.
Yep.
And what if they do some sort of, they're talking about the possibility of using drones to spread fentanyl over cities. Like, academics are talking about it, but mainstream media, politicians, nobody mentions that. Like, and is there something the Pentagon doesn't know? They're not telling us that they're preparing for this? Is this why they're legalizing Narcan with the FDA? Like, we all need to be prepared. Like, we need to do something about our border. This is the supply side problem.
Yep.
The statistics are that drug use among teens is at an all-time low, yet deaths among teens are an all-time high.
Yep. I believe that. Yep.
I look this stuff up every day. Every day I Google, and I'm posting. If people want to follow on my Facebook page, I'm posting information about it, and on Instagram every day now.
Is it just your name, Rebecca Kiesling, on Facebook?
Yeah.
Okay. I will put up a little graphic, but it's Rebecca, Rebecca, Kiesling.
Yeah, and
Okay.
I'm posting on Twitter about it and on LinkedIn.
Okay.
Because now I'm meeting so many other parents, and I'm just learning so much more, and I just feel like, you know what, I have a little bit of energy, kind of got a kick in the butt there, and I feel like maybe I could make more of a difference. So
absolutely, I think you already have, and I think with your I don't know if this sounds right, but like your tendency toward activism, like you're not one to just sit back and go, oh, this doesn't have anything to do with me. It personally had something to do with you, and you're not going to sit back and let it just go by. And I appreciate that.
I'm not starting a new foundation, though. There's so many out there already. You know?
Yeah. But you have a voice, and you've done something, and you will continue. I know you will, because it's got to be done. Thank you, Rebecca. Thank you for what you do, and thank you for speaking out, and thank you for educating people, because that's the biggest thing we can do, is to educate people on this problem.
I guess, one last thing again, for any parents who have lost their kids and they want to be a voice and they want to do something, because I've had parents come to me and say, I want to do what you're doing. First of all, it's easy to lobby. Become your own lobbyist. Reach out to every legislator in your state, reach out to Congress. There's, the governmental websites that have all their contact information. Okay. You can reach out to them. You can pay them a visit. You can schedule appointments. And, if you have something that you want changed in your state, laws that you need changed, look up the current statute, write out what you think the wording needs to be, and present it, and contact every media. Let them know that you're pushing for this law. Say you want a press conference, if you can get a legislator who's willing to sponsor it, And then as far as testifying at the state level, because I know some other parents have done that, never read your testimony. Never read it. Okay? You can write out your testimony ahead of time, give them each a copy, but you need to look them in the eyes, and you need to show your emotion. Don't ever be afraid, of crying, right? I mean, I ugly cried. You can let it out, right? Let it out. Obviously, by me losing it like I did, I think that it actually did have some kind of impact. And, maybe Benny Thompson did me a favor, did us all a favor by being such a jerk, And then Biden laughing at me, he's like,
we're not going to go there. Not a political podcast, but you are absolutely correct. Rebecca, thank you for talking to us today. Again, we are just so very sorry for your loss. Sorry that that has to happen to someone such as yourself, or to anybody. And we appreciate you being willing to tell us the story. And thank you.
And anybody else, be kind to yourself. Be really kind to yourself. You matter too.
Thank you for listening today. It's scary. Children are dying at an alarming rate from fake pills, from fake Percocet, fake Adderall, fake Xanax, even fake Tylenol. It's scary, and you need to educate your kids and educate yourself. We'll be back again with another interview.
You have been listening to the Addiction Podcast, Point of No Return. For more information, reach out to us on Facebook or go to www.theaddictionpodcast.com. Our email is theaddictionpodcast@yahoo.com.